Hello and welcome. My name is Carol Carter and I'm the founder and CEO of Global Minded. We are all about creating a capable, diverse talent pipeline to get more women, leaders of color, underrepresented populations, and all manner of how you can define diversity into the education, economic mobility, and leadership pipeline. And we do that in a number of different ways. We have programs for first generation to college student leaders. Every year we connect them to role models, mentors, internships, and jobs. We have an annual conference that this year is virtual, and this is part of it that you're experiencing. And then we also work with different colleges, our HBCU partners, our minority serving institutions, and several of the tribal colleges, as well as state colleges around the country that have high Pell eligible going students. So the final thing we do, and this is a big way that we got to know Mort this year, is we have inclusive leader awards every year across 15 industry sectors. And we know that until diverse leaders are as popular and as well-known household names like sports stars and movie stars, we're not going to have diversity that we need across critical areas like education and foundations and funders and corporations. So Mort was the winner of this year's K-12 award, and this is how we really got to know so much more about his work with Urban Academy. So it's a pleasure to have you all here, and I'll say that we're delighted you're part of our conference this year, and the theme this year is Reboot Resilience, Rebound Remarkable. So each of our sessions are going to show us the strength within ourselves, our abilities to really come back stronger than ever. I call it COVID strong. And that is a lot of the magic and the talent within the people that you're going to meet today. So with that, Dr. Mort Sherman, welcome and welcome to your panelists.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you so much for coordinating this event and for the leadership over the past couple of years for Global Minded. It's really an honor to join you and to recognize the great work you've been doing with your remarkable team. I'm trying to think how many years. Is it 4 or 5 years now since you created Global Minded?
We launched in 2014. We had our first conference in 2015. So now we're doing a series called Where Are They Now of our students from those first and second classes, and they're out. One of them this Friday is in education, and he runs program manager for the IB program in different public schools. So it's just cool to see where people's gifts and talents have taken.
I remember those early conversations with you, and I remember one year I couldn't make it out, and Maria, I sent our good friend Joe Harrison to represent me at your national conference in Denver. So thank you, Carol, for bringing us all together. It's really terrific. Let me bring together or introduce our panelists, some of the most remarkable leaders in education, I think, in the country, both experience rising and making an imprint on the national level in many, many different ways. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then I'm going to jump right in because I can't tell you. I bet you if we all count up the number of webinars that we've done, the number of slides that we've done, we would be COVID weary in so many ways. So what I want to do today is have a conversation among remarkable leaders without putting up a lot of slides. However, at one point, Khalid, I do want you to show your great video about the work you've done in Reading. Except for that, that one moment we'll go to some video, hoping it works. Let's go around and just first do a quick introduction of yourself and your position. And then just as you're doing that, just to give you a warning, my first question is going to be why is this important? Like here I am as a white guy. I've been a pretty good teacher, pretty good principal, pretty good superintendent, probably not nearly as good as any of you, but isn't that sufficient? Why do we need a diverse pipeline? Sorry for that. Maria, why don't we start with you?
Unmute. You would think that with all of the sessions we would have been in that we would just automatically unmute, right?
I do have a new phrase, however. It's not that you're muted, it's your computer is muted. Your voice is working fine.
I like that, Mort. Well, Mort, thank you. And Carol, thank you. And it's an honor to be here with my esteemed colleagues. And I'm looking forward to the conversation and to learning from them as well. I am a professor of clinical education at the USC Rossier School of Education. I joined the School of Education after retiring as a superintendent in California. And it's been such a pleasure for me just being part of the school, but also being part of starting the Urban Superintendent Academy. That is where I got to know Mort very well. And we are just finishing our 6th cohort and recruiting for our 7th cohort. So the drive behind that was really to work to add more diverse leaders to our school systems. And it has been such a joy to work with the participants in each of the cohorts. I know that I'm going to speak first personally, Mort, that when I was a young student, a Latina going through school, I never saw anyone who represented my background. And the sense of urgency that we have right now, both societally but also more importantly for our students in the classrooms of our public schools across the nation. We need to do this work together. And so I'm looking forward to the discussion, because I know that my colleagues will have some great insights, and that we will continue to partner together, Mort, to do this work.
Thank you, Maria. So good to join you. It's been, gosh, I mean, since last year, where did we see each other? In last February at a national conference. So it's been a while. So let me do a transition based upon you would just say to Michael, who was a graduate of the Urban Academy, and now is a superintendent and was a commissioner in our national works. Michael, would you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everybody. Mort, great to see you again. Carol, thank you for inviting me. And then also Maria and Khalid, it's always a pleasure to see you. Yes, underscore what Mort stated, Michael Connor, Superintendent of Middletown Public Schools in Middletown, Connecticut, was a part of cohort 3 of the AASA Howard University Urban Superintendents Academy, and also served on the Learning 2025 National Commission with Khalil. Our report just was disseminated nationally August 8th, 2021. This topic is close to me, and is not only is it an education imperative, but I also think that it's become a problem of practice where we are seeing very limited men and women of color in education, specifically in the leadership sector. I'm one of 7 African-American superintendents, both men and women in Connecticut. Is even more dismal at the classroom level in Connecticut as well, when the majority of our students in the state of Connecticut are becoming Black and brown. Speaking with Maria, what she stated, I didn't have a Black or brown teacher until I went into the college level. And I saw through my K through 12 trajectory. So I think that now, as we start thinking about strengthening and deepening the pipeline, or even recruiting individuals into the pipeline and keeping them there, we have to be more provocative and bold. Just like with our Learning 2025 national report that we wrote, we have to be bold in the context of identifying Black and brown leaders, as well as classroom practitioners for our students as well. So this is a topic near and dear to my heart, Mort. Thank you. Looking forward to talking about it.
Thank you, Michael. Khalid, also a commissioner, but I also want to introduce as one of 4 finalists for National Superintendent of the Year. Yes, it's just a remarkable honor and a great distinction. And near my hometown of Allentown, you're in Reading, PA, and boy, I remember as a kid growing up and driving to the castle. What did the restaurant, the Stokesay Castle? Was that the name of it?
Yes, the Castle on the Hill.
Yeah, still there?
Yes, indeed.
And thinking, what a world of difference Reading is. And here's the punchline. You have made it a world of difference in such a positive way. Khalid, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much, Mort, and thank you, Carol. And it's always a pleasure to be in the company of Maria and my brother, Michael. This is just a beautiful time in education, and a very timely topic to speak on. As you stated, Mort, I am the superintendent in the Reading School District in Reading, Pennsylvania. And I believe the transition, the demographic transitions in Reading demonstrate the importance nationally of how we need to diversify our staff. For example, as of about 20 years ago, Reading, Pennsylvania was mostly Caucasian, 50–60% Caucasian, always has been a 14% African-American population. And I sit here today, our school district is 88% Latino. So when you map those numbers onto the numbers in regards to staff that look like my students, I'm less than 5%. And that's an issue. This is a topic that's very close and near and dear to my heart. As I sit before you now in this conference, on this panel, everywhere I've been, even now, and I won't tell my age because people don't believe my age when I tell them, so I like to keep everyone guessing and thinking that I'm young. But everywhere that I've been the first or the only African-American male. And that has been throughout my career as a teacher, a dean of students, assistant principal, director of secondary education, and now twice as a superintendent. And what I mean by first or only, either the first African-American or the first African-American male. And I think that's problematic, especially as we're looking at the changing demographics throughout the United States of America. And we are, as we've learned during the midst of this pandemic, education is in the center of everything, from health to food insecurity, of course, curriculum, pedagogy, and instruction, leadership, vaccination sites. So it is of paramount importance that we have administrators in the pipeline developing those leadership skills to be able to lead children who look like them. Our Black and brown students, they are emerging throughout the United States at alarming paces. For example, I said we're 88% Latino here in Reading. You can go out into the rural areas in the Midwest, and you'll look at the demographics and you'll say, okay, here's 40% African-American, okay, 30% Caucasian, and then all of a sudden this other 30% Hispanic or Latino. We have to be bold in our recommendations and our leadership, passion, and purpose to be able to meet the needs, the diverse changing needs of our students. And one way to do it is to have leaders that look like them, because that gives us the opportunity to make our messaging so extraordinary, whereas we can create that pipeline while the children are in our K-12 school systems.
So Khalid, let me pick up a couple of themes that you and Michael and Maria mentioned. First of all, you are young, everything's relative. From where I sit, you're a kid. But Michael said something really important that I think reflects the experience of many of us. I never had a teacher nor administrator of color until I went to college, right? And Michael, you said that happened. That's not on you yet. When you look at the statistics, we know that right now, majority of children in our public schools are children who are of color, right? And we also know that only 2 to 3% of our superintendents are Latino, and only 2 or 3% are Black. And why is that? Why, with this change in the demographics, the increase that's occurred over not just this past year, but I think it was Khalid, you even mentioned now just the increase in Reading over the past couple of decades. Why hasn't the representation of teachers and administrators of color kept pace with the students as they've come into our classrooms? Why haven't kids got into the field? Who wants to start with that?
I could start with that, since I left it off at talking about the K-12 system. I believe that we have not traditionally done a good job of overtly recruiting kids of color into education. Now, there are some historical barriers, or you look at it contextually when you're going all the way back to John Dewey in 1914, and you start looking at the democracy of education and things of that nature. There has not been a bright light cast on education as a career path of prominence. I believe we have to do a better job in the K-12 ranks to be able to recruit children, get them into teacher preparation programs at the high school level, and then having a pathway for them to study even further in college, and then have incentives to bring them back. I believe we have to do some overt recruitment. as stage one. So I'll stop right there.
Michael, Maria?
Khalil makes a great point, but I also too want to take on the historical aspect of it, where our families and our students have not had great experiences in the education realm and in the sector as well. Moreover, when we see Black and Brown individuals matriculate into a pre-service program, it is an arduous task to complete. And what I mean by complete is the relational aspect of it, the obsolete of culturally responsive practices, and how to be able to respond in a pedagogical manner with the students that are Black and Brown, so they become disengaged. I speak to students that talk about there's no representation of me or my heritage or my culture within the pre-service program. And then when you get into the actual school environment, there's just there's relationship quandaries that these individuals face, i.e., I'm the only Black teacher in my school, or there's multiple microaggressions from staff members and they don't even know that they're providing microaggressions. So it's not only just how we get or eliminate those barriers or those pitfalls that they experience just trying to become a teacher, but also retaining them and making it more culturally sensitive for teachers, Black and Brown teachers, in their natural environments as well. It's even worse when you get to be a principal and superintendent. So it is again, how do we make education more accessible? And what I mean by that is accessible for Black and Brown men to become educators and to be and to stay into the field.
And I'll add the dimension of being a woman to that, because not only was the issue for me not seeing someone like me as I came up through my education, the fact of the matter is that women in these leadership roles is also a factor. And so I just want to throw that little additional complexity into it, because women of color, women period, need to be also recruited intentionally for higher leadership roles. They're present in our systems, but they're not present in the same percentage as you would expect. So our leaders of color are in our classrooms right now, not in some of the places that my colleagues have described, but there are places where we have women of color, we have leaders, potential leaders of color, doing an amazing job of educating students. And we have a responsibility to identify those individuals if we're in a leadership capacity, and to help promote the conditions within systems where they are valued for what they bring. And just thinking of that recent Wallace Foundation publication on the principalship, and the fact that we know that individuals of color who are leading systems, that there's a greater likelihood that educators of color will be attracted to those places and will stay there. So identifying them, keeping them, developing them, mentoring them up to positions of leadership is crucial. I would never have thought that I would be a superintendent. When I became a teacher, I felt like I had, earned the gold ring on the merry-go-round. That was it. I was in heaven to be a teacher. I loved teaching, but someone tapped me on the shoulder one day and said, Maria, you have the potential to do other things and to have a broader impact. And so I think we have a collective responsibility to identify and help our talented classroom teachers move up into positions of leadership, and then keep them there, right? Keeping them there is so important.
And I just want to interject one really quick thing on this point with the women, because I researched across all the sectors we served last year, number of people of color, number of women. And I noticed among superintendents, it looked like there were less than 2,000 women. There were like 13,500 men. And then the education profession is 72% women. So it's really like looking at all these different things going, this is why you need the mentors and the sponsors and all those people to help.
Carol, in our recent survey, just was published a couple of weeks ago from AASA, we estimate about 26% of all superintendents are women. It has been as high as 29%, and it fell back down, just as it did with Fortune 500 leaders in recent years. Women leaders went down about 24%. We're working really hard. Valerie Truesdale leads our women's initiatives. I want to go back to a couple of themes. Gosh, there's so many notes I'm taking here. So we have 3 hours for this discussion, right, Carol? You know, Michael and Khalid, I want to let you into a conversation that my dear friend, who's no longer with us, Joe Hairston, and Maria and I had. I mean, I love that man. And we struggled, Maria, with language when we wrote the Urban Superintendents Academy. And I wish Joe were here today to hear this conversation, because Maria, you might remember, we didn't know what to say. We didn't know whether to say Black or brown or African American or students of color. And we felt we used the term underrepresented. So what does that mean, right? But it's still there in our language. And when we listen to ourselves today, how much more explicit we are and candid we are in just such a short period of time. And so I think part of it is that we as a society are pushing hard to where we should have been maybe 50, 60, 70 years ago. But the door's opening. And I don't know whether it's Khalid or Michael, and then you can respond to all this, talked about the kids who are in the classrooms, not just today, like they're future leaders, but did not have good experiences in the classroom. So why in the world, if you didn't have a good experience, would you want to go into that profession? I don't know who said that. Was that Khalid who said that?
It was Michael.
It was Michael. Michael, I never thought about it in that light. Do you want to just talk a little bit more about, from the kids' point of view, that, and Carol does such great work with so many kids across the world, but I'm just so fascinated by that perspective. It seems like so simple. You provide some incentives, you provide some mentors, but we're overcoming 13 years of bad experience in order to even think that might occur.
Yeah, no, and Mort, I tell you, Dr. Hairston set the pillar for Khalid and I to be superintendents here. So God rest his soul. But when I spoke to students, right, and I asked them, literally, we wanted to talk about, using a research methodology. I did an ethnographic approach of asking, why don't you go in education? And, kids, they'll tell you the truth. And, I came in with the hypothesis that it was because the career isn't as prestigious, quote unquote, right? And money, but it wasn't that. It was that purely experiences, and saying, I don't want to be a teacher, or I don't want to go into administration, is the fact that I didn't have a great experience in myself, whether it be disconnect from the context of pedagogy, whether it be not seeing them in the curriculums. Our students now, Generation Alpha and Generation Z, they're very provocative in their statements, and they'll say, we want more representation, both from a cultural responsive lens in the classroom as well as practices. So, because they have limited experiences, and we know that this is a Eurocentric industrial model with Eurocentric practices, there's a level of disconnect, and even our families talk about it as well. I have families that said, I don't know how you got to where you are, Dr. Connor. And your mother must be an angel, because you're at where you're at, and it's because they know the education system for Black and Brown families.
Khalid, do you want to get into that?
Yes, and I can follow up by saying that, looking at some of those experiences, and actually being a student who had some negative experiences, you don't have the opportunity to gain access to what education is all about behind the scenes. The only thing that the students get to see is the teacher, or in my case, I got to see the assistant principal often. But having the opportunity to be able to understand what happens in a school system and how you can be the change that you want to see. We mentioned Dr. Hairston, and may God bless his soul. One of the things, as an incoming and new superintendent in Maryland, he wrapped his arms around me and provided me with more access to keep that ferocity to move further, to go bigger in the career. All the way up until, a few weeks before he passed away, I had a conversation with him about expanding and doing more. And he was the first administrator that I had that spoke with me about changing my terminology from diversity to equity. And I mean, just having access. So in turn, paying it forward, for administrators of color, which I can attest for everyone that's on this screen, Maria and also Michael, we make ourselves accessible to the students and to the community, where it's not, as I always like to talk about, the road not taken. We can give students an opportunity to see what the pathway looks like. I've walked the path, I've taken the journey. I need you and I need your friends. You can have an impact in this career. You can make the changes that you want to see. But it is a huge challenge to be able to overcome some of the history and the pieces, and it's one simplistic word, it's relationships, perceptual inferences or ideas or ideology about kids. For example, as I was learning about educating Latinos and Latinas, when I was a teacher at Central York School District back in 1996, I started to get a great emergence of Latino and Hispanic students. I needed to learn. And I started to learn, like, okay, this is a learning process. I have to have the cultural competencies. I have to understand where the children are coming from so I'll know where to lead them. For example, we were talking about, a celebration for the young ladies when they're 16 years old, the quinceañeras. And we know that once they're 16, they're treated differently culturally, where the young men, they're just trying to find their way. Well, these young women are equipped to be women in the household. And so you have to understand that and respect that. Looking at our Asian students and population where, from the Eurocentric methodologies of teaching, I stand and deliver, I teach, you learn, I talk, you look at me. No, not with my Asian students. Looking at me as a sign of disrespect. Understanding those cultural competencies to being able to lead. Understanding that, hey, I'm an African-American male. Sometimes it gets, you're gonna get a lot of head movement from me. I may come off as being loud, but that should not be deemed as aggressive or taking some of the perception like, oh my goodness, aggressive. And then we start looking at the pipeline data of young men of color as early as third grade getting moved into special ed. A lot of misidentification because behaviorally and perceptually, they present as SEL, socially and emotionally disturbed students. There's a lot of history to unravel to be able to get to this end result that we're talking about. But administrators of color have the opportunity through authenticity of experiences to be able to lead children and families down these pathways. But it's a tough sell. It's a very tough sell.
So there's a thread emerging here. The relationship question, Michael, you first put on the table, so to speak, the virtual table. The question of the experience and the support. Khalid, I like your image of Joe Hairston hugging you, putting his arms around you. He certainly did that. Maria, this idea of recognizing the differences. It's just not a black or brown, it's gender. There are many deep issues that are going on here. But I wonder if the core to it, and you could create this thread, is what Michael said, is relationships. Khalid, do you have your video teed up? Because you just used the phrase, the road not taken. No, and I want to introduce, because it's interesting, don't play it yet, it's Robert Frost, right? It's a white poet. How many of us at the same time had curriculum, had literature, not just teachers, but something else which grounded us in a world beyond our Eurocentric, I think that was your phrase, Michael, how many of us had the understanding of what it is to be a Latina? We didn't have that. I love what you did for this child and for your community through this video. So if you play it now. Not working. You look good, but we can't hear you. Your sound's off.
You know what? I think the thing is you need to unmute yourself and then I think it'll play. So we'll try it again.
Oh, wait.
As far as I could.
Rewind. Do it again.
I got.
No.
Hello, I'm Dr. Khalid Mumin, and welcome to the 2020-2021 school year. As we all know, we are living in unprecedented times, and I believe it's appropriate for me to begin with one of my favorite poems, The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. Two roads diverged in the yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveler, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could. I got this stuck. Have you heard of Kid President? Well, I'm Kid Superintendent, and I think we all need a pep talk. Testing. The past couple of months haven't been easy, huh? A global pandemic, politics, social unrest, earthquake, tornadoes, Tiger King. No! The show is not what I thought it was about. Your glasses bugging up when you wear a mask. Fighting over toilet paper? The unmute button! You're on mute! Spider and winter flies, desert locusts, and murderous hornets. I mean, where did it even come from, man? You get the idea. 2020 has been kicking our butt. Like you say, butts, right? It's okay to feel overwhelmed right now, or anxious, or nervous about remote learning. Your Bitmojis look awesome, by the way. Maybe you're worried about students. I'm worried about myself and everybody else. But remember, we're all doing the best we can, and that's all that matters. Kids aren't looking for perfection. We're just looking for you to be present. I know that because I'm a kid. So let's be good humans. Unless if you're an insect or blowfish. And sprinkle kindness. By the way, I hate sprinkle. And let's give each other grace, not grief. We're all in this together. And we've got to support each other. And hugs! But you know this already because that's what people do. You're resilient and resourceful. When times get tough, you know how to pull together. No cap. And there's still plenty of good stuff in the world, right? Like cinnamon toast crunch. I see. And Lizzo, my mom likes her music a lot. A lot. And funny TikTok videos. And Sharpie, you gotta love those. And we've got you. You are good. Those scrap that. You are great. We need you here. No matter your job, you each have something special and amazing to offer. You can do virtually anything. Get it? Virtually? It's a joke. Seriously, you can do this. You are the champion Rita Pearson was talking about. I believe in you, and I know you'll stay RSD proud no matter the distance. It's kind of like Doc was trying to say. Two roads diverged in a wood, and right now, we gotta take the one less travel. You know, uncharted territory and all. I know it might get a little scary, actually a lot scary. But you got this. Put on your favorite fuzzy socks. No one can see your feet on Google Meets, but definitely still wear your pants. And press forward with a positive attitude. It's gonna make all the difference.
Oh my goodness.
Khalid, first time I saw that, I fell in love with it. And I was watching your face. You know, you were mouthing every word. It was wonderful. Yeah, look at you getting a sitting ovation. and
that young man, he asked me, that is Jermaine Edwards. He is my director of communications son. And he stepped in because the kid that we had his mother, they left. And he said, I'll do it. the entire time he was worried about his pocket square. He said, "Doc, how did I do? I lost my pocket square." I said, "What? This video has 4 million hits." But the key is this: what he wanted to do, which really maps onto this conversation, he was so excited to be in my chair because he says, "You know what? I think I want to be a superintendent one day." This is the type of influence that we have as leaders to be able to say, instead of, "Oh, I'm just a superintendent. Oh, the job is this a job." No, I said, "I'll keep the seat warm for you, man." And we just keep moving. And I think we have to begin at these early stages and to be able to combat against some of the historical constructs that has created a lot of these barriers to getting to some of these positions.
Thank you. Michael or Maria, do you want to comment on that before? I have a whole bunch of questions I want to follow through, but any comments before we go on?
I think one thing that just really is powerful is, being able to see yourself as, in that chair, or see yourself in a role of influence. I'm going to go back to the women issue. We're doing better in portraying women, especially in the media. But, being able to see yourself as a person of color who can have an influence. I mean, that was powerful. When you said that, I said, yes, that's what it is. It's about seeing the potential for yourself, that it isn't an anomaly, that it's possible and doable, and that you can take that path. I loved it. Great, impactful video. Thank you for sharing it, and with millions of people all over the globe.
Michael, comments?
No, I mean, Khalid is my fraternity brother. That's the standard that Alpha set. So I'm so proud of Khalid. But you know what? What got to me was just not the video, is that outside of the video, the kid stated, "I want to be a superintendent." And that's the type of models that we need to provide more of. And that's why it's so essential and critical that we have more Black and brown men and women in leadership roles, because that's what they want to strive for. I mean, I've heard so many times, I see some of our little girls, "Oh, I want to be like the vice president. I can do it now," and those are the examples that we want to continue to set. So, but the video, that's epic.
It is epic. But let me parse it out just a little bit. And there's some chats coming up about loving the video, and a question about some of the legislation, some of the, we're actually, I think, up to 17 states right now that has some really strong anti-equity kinds of languages emerging. I want to come back to that in a second. But I think the video, Khalid, hits the question of relationships, raises the potential possibilities, but it does something else. From a white point of view, I'm wondering any kind of reactions you have from your community, because what it does, something I didn't grow up, and Michael said you didn't grow up with, is being able to see a Black kid who could sit in that superintendent seat and believe that it could happen. That whether you're white or Black or brown or women or men, but it's believing the possibilities. It's creating images that are very different than existed 5 or 10 years ago.
I believe here in Reading, it was somewhat deemed as normal because we've done a great push on student advocacy and student voice, and making ourselves accessible to the community and accessible to the students. The type of impact that it had nationally and internationally is where I took notes. There was a time in that video we had to do an edit. While it had shown for about a week or two, and we had to do an edit because he made a reference to a personality, professional actor who has gotten himself in trouble in regards to law enforcement. So we had to get that out of the video. And so we had it down for 2 days. And I got a call from a teacher in Australia who wanted me fired. Said, "Who is the superintendent that made the decision to take that video down? He needs to be fired. He or she needs to be fired. This is what we need right now. This is what the world needs right now." One, we have because she referenced the social unrest, and she said, we have a African-American boy giving a message about give grace, not grief. This is what the world needs right now. And it just blew me away. So we called her back. We got a kick out of the call back. Say, no, we had to take it down, and it's a edited version or revised version is going up. And it started to really resonate how important the imagery is, how important, you know, there are kids, similar to Kid President, there are kids that can look at that and say, hey, I can become a superintendent. And what do they do again? What happens in their office again? Wow, this guy had access to the superintendent's office and he's not in trouble. And for Jermaine, and also for other kids to say, well, the superintendent, he's pretty cool. He talks to me and he always talks about education, and kids are very quick to see, you know, to take inventory of your materialistic items and say, you know, Dr. Mumin, that looks nice. Great education did that for me. And guess what? You can do the same. With a great education, you can be standing before kids like yourself, teaching and be an administrator one day, just like me. Just like that. You'll never know. We have some kids in the pipeline now. I keep calling them kids. They're young adults now, graduating college, that we're trying to pull them back. But as Michael and Maria said earlier in this discussion, it's a tough sell because a lot of people in a lot of different industries are pulling at them. So we have to incentivize these moves also for our Black and Brown administrators.
So it's the messaging, it's the imagery, it's the content, right? Maria, I don't know if you want to jump in. I see your head agreeing with all of that. If you want to add something.
I am just so appreciate and value what Khalid and Michael are sharing, because they're in the seat now. And Mort, you and I were in the seat in the past. we're of the prior generation. And I can't tell you how excited I am to see both of you leading your systems. And, you know, the fact that you're here taking the time to share this message with others is so powerful. And going back to Dr. Hairston, who I loved too, and his courage to speak up on some of these issues before there was some of the societal push that we have now. This was who he was, and he was always real and authentic and unafraid and unapologetic to put the facts out there. So I just wanted to also, you know, send him a message because we all miss him so much. But Mort, doesn't it excite you to see who's in the seat now? I get excited.
Well, I do, and particularly, well, Marie, we're not going to pass so quickly from you. When I see Michael, who went through our program, the Howard component of it, so it's shaping. It's, you know, I don't know, Michael, I ever hugged you as part of that program. I don't know if I reached up, because he's actually, Khalid's taller than I am, but I'm going to hug both of them when I see them. Hey, I want to move on to something, and by the way, I wrote down that phrase, grace, not grief. What a nice, I'm picturing that over the entrance to high schools across America. What a different message that would be. Khalid and Michael, you both were a part of a national initiative that we did at AASA. I'm going to put on the screen, if you don't mind, Carol, a little background. We've talked a little bit about this, and part of it, it works, right? If I show, if I point, you know, right up here, diverse educational pipeline. So Carol, it matches what these two commissioners, Michael and Khalid, talked about as one of 27 hand-selected and really prominent commissioners put together as a roadmap for AASA for the next 4 years. This is our work. Michael, you wanted to comment about some of the work of the commission, and particularly in light of this, please.
Yeah, Mort, the work was so compelling. You know, when we talked about it from the design into the conceptual sense of how we can reimagine education and the holistic redesign and transformation of the system, is very disruptive. And what I mean by disruptive in the context of disruptive for how we're going to be able to leverage equity for true anti-marginalized environments. You know, the whole aspect of redesigning the system to re-engineering instruction around this level of co-authoring. Co-authoring in the context of students being co-authors of their learning, specifically this flexible model that's around social and emotional cognitive growth. Only incubators of innovators to have these high levels of discussions of this level of disruption in education. But what's different is that this report is, we got 4 years. So there's a level of urgency and it's going to be implemented. And I think, with the lighthouse districts and the demonstration sites will be able to be models to exemplify these high level practices, that this is not just from a theoretical or conceptual sense. There's really a level of integration between theory and practice to report recommendations and implementation from the demonstration sites as well as the lighthouse site. So yes, this is very, very captivating and compelling. And I hope to see this being leveraged in totality in a macro level within the next 4 years. But Mort, it was probably one of the highest honor of my education career just to serve on this commission and just to be a part of that report.
Yeah. Maria, before I go to Khalid, also to make a comment, because he was one of our commissioners, Pedro, as your dean at Ross-Air, was our initial speaker on equity at our kickoff in 2015 in the urban program. And now he's your dean. I mean, how wonderful is that? But it leads to the question, it's not just K-12, although we're focusing on K-12 today, Carol, but this question about what the role of universities is in terms of training. And let me push a little bit. Dan Dominich and I were talking today about a conversation he was having with the dean at Arizona State. And part of the conversation was about the role of teacher and how the role of teacher needs to change to make it more appealing. So if we continue what we did before and just tinker with it, we'll be doing better what we're already doing in a mediocre way. So I'm wondering at the university level, if you're having those conversations with a leader like Pedro and reshaping teacher preparation.
It's so wonderful, to have him when we heard him at that very first kickoff, and now he's leading our School of Education, and he is dynamic because he is very practitioner oriented. He's very much on the research informing what we do in practice. Powerful energy that he brought to our school. And we are having those conversations in deep and meaningful ways to really challenge us as faculty in terms of our opportunities to influence our students' thinking, to be much more intentional in bringing those conversations to the surface in our classrooms. And so, most of our work is at the master's in teaching or at the doctoral level. So it's powerful conversations that we are able to have with our students. And Pedro is, he is an energy to be reckoned with in terms of his determination to really have these conversations at a broader level. He's very, very, very committed to what is democracy and what should we be doing, in all of the different roles we have in higher education and K-12. And so it's great to have him there.
Yeah, is USC having that conversation as one of the leading teacher preparation universities in the country about the different roles, the changing role of teachers and teaching? Because what Khalid and what we talked about, Michael, in the center of this is like looking deeply at re-engineering, restructuring, and co-authoring. Those are significant shifts. It's right there in the center of what we wanted to present as a commission. Is that happening in the university level, that kind of conversation for teachers?
What's happening for faculty is there's been a university-wide emphasis on quality teaching. And so that started a couple of years ago and is driving a lot of the work there. And it's really taking a look at what does a faculty member, how do you use your opportunity when you're with students to really elevate that so that you're not just a talking head, but rather it's very engaging. And what does that look like? And so that's been going on very intentionally across the university. We have our Race and Equity Center that Sean Harper runs. And so a lot of the work around how do you bring in intentionally the conversations that you need to have with students, whether they're at the School of Education or they're in the business school or in another school. So it's an exciting time at our university. That work is not just running alongside in a silo, but is actually being infused in the core of what is quality teaching look like at the university level.
So Khalid, I want to turn to you as both a commissioner and then pick up on that question. If you don't mind me putting you on the spot, I was just asking Maria, when you look at your work in Reading and you look at your work as a commissioner, look at this co-authoring question and the restructuring, re-engineering the role of teaching and the role of teachers, and what Michael picked up on that, like so much is on the table, and the role of relationship and cultural competency and all that. So do you see through the commission and through your own work, the role of teachers and teaching changing?
Yes, I see it as a great possibility. One of the things that has to happen is I believe we have to be able to capture this energy that we have found as of recent with the youth in regards to, the simplicity of listening, to listening to the needs of children. It's so simplistic, but it's so important. I believe, as it has taken a couple of times or some time for us to get to this point. I'm thinking back a couple of years ago when we had a huge push, and I'm talking about children, in regards to the DREAM Act. And then that fizzled out. Then there was another big push with the LGBTQIA movement that fizzled out. And now with social unrest on our doorstep and Black Lives Matter, we got to listen. Everyone needs to listen now. It's important to listen to kids. So I say there's a quote that I use that I think is going to be that is paramount for how we further develop teachers to be able to step into these roles. And it's too many times when change is a necessity in schools, we're guilty as administrators, coming late to the table to taking reactive stances in an attempt to seek positive results. We have to turn the tables. To get to those positive results, they begin with a starting point is student advocacy. That's one thing that was left out in traditional teacher education preparation programming. You learn a lot about your subject matter. You learn a lot about how to deliver a lesson, going through the steps, the 5 stages, anticipatory sets all the way through to closure. But we missed the boat on the value and power of building relationships. The premonition to that, and I don't want to get too long-winded on this, I'm thinking of it, the only time we really talk about student relationships, I remember in teacher prep programs, was about discipline. And what was changing the world in discipline back in '94 was Kerwin Mindler's Discipline with Dignity. Well, guess what? Kerwin Mindler got it right. Instead of focusing on the punitive pieces of the disciplinary process, let's talk and engage with the child to say, okay, you made a mistake. There's more time left. What will you do differently? And let's set some goals and let's turn this into a positive experience. But we learn that through discipline. That should be learned through how you deliver pedagogy and instruction. And it has to be put right out there. You have to engage with learners to be able to understand where they're coming from, so you know where to lead them to or how to lead them to those places. And I think we missed that because we talk about tradition in K-12 education. My goodness, teacher prep programs look pretty similar across the states. across the nation, very traditional and very, very much infused with theory. There has to be a shift to where the practitioner-based learning approaches are taken more seriously. Yeah, it has to be practitioner-based. Theory, we can learn theory along the way, but what we've learned, and especially as superintendents, and you know this more, there's some things you just can't teach. You just can't teach an aspiring teacher or a new teacher. You know, they either have it or they don't. And if they don't have the capacity to build relationships and that head and heart alignment to be able to have empathy for the children that they're serving and the communities that they're serving within, you can't create it. They have to come with that intrinsically, has to be intrinsically instilled in them. And I think that's where teacher preparation programs, especially from the work that was done on the commission, will be able to force that envelope to get to practitioner-based approaches to really address the whole child.
So I want to, before Michael, I have a question for you. I want to hold up some books, and they never appear great on the screen, but I want to hold up some just in terms of books that I would recommend to our audience. First of all, a wonderful book by, oh my gosh, can you see it? That good-looking young man. Problem Child. It's a great read, Khalid. Thank you for writing this book. A colleague of ours talked about relationships, Michael. Lavelle Brown from Ithaca. That's it, right? The culture of love. Can you imagine if there was somebody that I grew up with as a theorist and a practitioner said, can you imagine if every day, every teacher said to every kid, this is important, you could do it, and I won't give up on you, even when you've given up on yourself. The culture of love. In terms of Latino leaders, Maria, have you seen this one? This is wonderful. The Latino culture is captured so beautifully in here. Highly recommend this for those of you who are working as Latino leaders or training them. And finally, one that my colleague and your colleague Maria brought into the Howard program, No BS. Did you know this book? And we brought this speaker in. But so we have like a minute or two left, Carol, right? I think not much more than that. Give us 2 minutes, right? So I'm able to
You
say,
could go a little bit longer.
well, not too much longer because I've got to run to my aging back and get it taken care of by a physical therapist. So I want to give each of you a chance to make a concluding comment around this theme. There was a spark. There was something that happened in your life that brought you to the top of our profession. Maria, I mean, where you are at USC is inspiring. Khalid, an author, one of 4 superintendents recognized as finalists for Superintendent of the Year by your professional association. Michael, what you're doing, I just, I tell people, if you want some great answers and insight to the work, call Michael. So something happened. Something happened for the 3 of you that's not happened to millions of other kids. And so what's the lesson that we could take away at the end of this hour together that made the difference for you? Let's start with you, Michael.
Mort, that's a great question. I think what sparked the plug was when I was a classroom teacher, right? And firsthand, I got to see the disparities. But I think even before that was in high school, where I didn't have not one Black or brown teacher, but what sparked that was I wanted to be that difference for students that were coming up after me. And I remember when I was a senior in high school, and we had this kind of like this exchange program, and I was the only Black or brown male or female that was in the group. And we went to an elementary school, and the Black and brown children ran up to me, and I said, that's where I need to be. And to keep moving through this trajectory of education is very humbling. But I also want to pull up many individuals at the same time so that we can be able to have more of an impact on our students holistically. And this is what keeps me going. I think what keeps me going is the whole fight for what we worked on the commission, make sure no student is marginalized, and to create equitable learning environments, not only just for our students, but also for our staff as well. So great question, Mort. Really appreciate that.
Thank you. Khalid? That's spark.
Mort, that's a great question, and I agree wholeheartedly with what Michael has said. And I take it a little further back, and talking about it for for intrinsic value. Poverty is a hell of a teacher. You see a lot of things that happen in settings of high poverty or acute poverty, where you're constantly living carpe diem as a kid and wondering, what is tomorrow going to look like? Forget about the future. What is tomorrow going to look like? Is it going to be basketball that gets me out? Is it going to be rap that gets me out? What is it that's going to take me from this place? And hopefully I have the opportunity to come back and change this environment. I shot the basketball and I was pretty good at that, but that wouldn't have done it. Knees are bad. In regards to rapping, nah, I'm a consumer of music. I listen to it. Education was the bucket that I was able to put a lot of energy into. Many nights of wondering and crying, because it's like, especially for African-American boys, it's life or death. And when you're seeing death around you and your houses are falling down in your neighborhood and you're like, what is my future going to look like? I don't want to work in a factory, and factories are leaving. This is the 90s. It's like there were mentors that inspired me that said, you know what, kid, and this is important. It's about relationships. You got what it takes to be able to leave this place and come back and do something. So the neighborhood protected me and insulated me. And I had some good teachers and a good basketball coach. And I was driven. And I looked at it this way. Was I a good basketball player? Yes, I was a scholarship basketball player, but I wasn't a pro, an NBA player. But the reason why I got as far as I did is because I worked hard. And we have a saying, in the African-American community, that you have to do things 10 times better. And I believe in that. So I say this, and I know a couple of my colleagues are on this panel are in global ed, and they know that I've said this before. While you're sleeping, I'm out at night with the lantern and I'm planning and I'm moving. And I'm moving, because the more I move, the more capacity and influence I have to pay it forward and pull people along with me. My job is to open the door a little bit and then let them come through. We have to be that inspiring all the time. And I'll end on an acronym that I use all the time. It's HOPE. You have to focus and be very clear about the health and safety of the young people. Open advocacy, passionate action, and empathy. You got to wear it on your sleeve. That head and heart alignment is so important. And that's what drives me, because poverty/failure, that's a fear of mine. And I don't want to go back there. I don't want to go back there without being successful, knowing that I've helped hundreds or thousands of people to be able to elevate out of those situations. So it's mentoring and just that intrinsic motivation and fear of failure. That you just, even when it feels good, you pump yourself up for the big game by thinking of a scenario of failure to keep you motivated, because you got so many people to help, so many mouths to feed.
Thank you, Khalid. Maria?
I'm going to begin by just saying that if someone wanted to know about me, they would read the book that I wrote with my two co-authors, Culturally Proficient Society Begins in School, Leadership for Equity. And you would know that one of the things that impacted me was not speaking English when I started school, and the journey of going from feeling like I was in a dark hole to catching up to my peers, which took me up until I was in high school to completely catch up, how that shaped a lot of the leadership that I took on going forth. I promised myself that if I could do anything to make sure that children did not experience that sense of darkness around language, or the sense of not being valued, I wanted to do everything I could. So you would know that most of my early career was involved with bilingual education, and a lot of that was driven by my own personal experience, and the path out of poverty. One generation going from parents who didn't have high school degrees to having a PhD and teaching at a prestigious university. I always share that with families that I work with to understand, what's possible. And I continue to try to do my part to open up those doors for others to follow behind and to lead into the future.
Thank you, Maria. Carol, back to you. I want you to know that I really feel great that you gave me the opportunity to talk with three people that I not only respect, that I truly love, Michael and Khalid and Maria. I just know that the future of our country is in good hands, and I just love these colleagues of mine. Thank you for giving us a chance to have a conversation.
Well, and I love all of you, and Mort's the one person that I know, but I think that there are some incredible things that we can all do together. And one of the reasons that we have our Global Minded conference, and we've got a YouTube channel that's had 36,000 views, is that young people at our colleges, where they may not see people like you teaching them, they see all kinds of diverse leaders in topics that interest them in these different sessions. So I just want you all to know that that's the kind of impact with TRIO programs and Upward Bound and all the different groups that we work with. They are learning from you through this conference. And then we have equity teams every month in health and technology, higher ed, K-12, foundations and funders. And those are different ways that those students can see different people every single month in the areas that interest them. So I just appreciate so much you all making the time for this today, and for being the role models to so many people who you don't even know who these students are, but they see themselves in you and the path that you've taken to make a difference through education. So thank you so much. And Mort and I'll just say, we'll invite you guys next year to Denver in June, and we hope we're all together with all the other people under the Global Minded big tent along the whole pipeline. So thanks for everything. And it's just been a delight. And we will send you all the links. We'll publish tonight and tomorrow in our newsletter. It's read by 15,000 people. We'll have the links. And then I want to reach out to each of you so we can interview you all also for our newsletter. And our students who read that every day can see themselves in the fullness of your stories, that they can get to know more deeply that way. So we'll follow up for that as well. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night. So appreciate it. Take care. Bye-bye.